Hi everybody, my name is Moxley Stratton. I work for Weedmaps, otherwise known as WM Engineering, here a Platinum sponsor. Today I'm going to talk about three functions in the kernel module that you may not have used before and maybe use something else in this place. Talk a little bit about lists. So here's a test right here. And you'll notice on line 3, we're calling a function called list first, which will return the first item out of a list. And I review a lot of code, and I see this used a lot. But did you know there's a function in the kernel library, or the kernel module, called HD for head? That'll give you back the first item in the list. So you can use that, and it's a lot shorter. Also, if you want to get the count of a list, you've got enum count, which is useful. But did you know there's a function in the kernel library called length, which you can use instead? So those are two nice, useful functions. If you look in the Elixir source code for count, this is what it looks like, basically. And it does have a guard clause, so if it is a list, it just simply calls out to kernel length. So if you know you have a list, then the behavior is exactly the same. Next, I want to talk about structs. We've got a function here, and it takes a user struct and then a name and an email. And what this does is going to put the value of the name and the email into the struct. And in here, we're using map put to do that, which is how you normally put values onto a map. But a struct is a special kind of map. And in this example right here, I'm showing you the definition of the user struct and how you would instantiate it. And then maybe you didn't know this, but you can put any arbitrary key into the struct just like you can with any other kind of map. And the compiler doesn't complain, and nothing complains, and it'll just add that key to the struct. So the struct will take on a key that really doesn't belong to it. So it's probably a good idea not to use map put for structs for adding values to it. Instead, you could use the literal syntax for structs with the pipe character. So you can have on line 2, we've got we're using that syntax, and then we're adding name and email to the user struct. Also, we have the struct function, which is another function of the kernel module. And we can do the same thing as we showed in the last slide. There really isn't any difference in these two different cases. You can use one or the other. But if you don't know the keys ahead of time, like the name and the email that you're trying to add to the struct, let's say in this function right here, it works really well. So if the values is a keyword list or a map, it'll just apply those values to the struct. And if it contains keys that don't belong to the struct, those keys will not get added to the struct. So in summary, we've learned about list, head, and struct. And I use these functions all the time.